Nature-based infrastructure in some ways sounds like an oxymoron. When you think of infrastructure, you might think of a bridge or a road, and when you think of nature, you think of trees. But nature-based infrastructure is infrastructure that is set aside or exists already in terms of being a part of nature that provides services to people. So we build a bridge and it allows us to go across the water. Nature-based infrastructure could be something like an oyster reef that is a breakwater and reduces wave energy, and also is an area where nutrients tend to be removed by microorganisms that occur naturally. So if you understand how natural systems work and the qualities that they have, you have the potential to use them as a tool to fight degradation of ecosystems. So in areas that you've lost salt marshes or oyster reefs, there is a potential to restore them, or in areas where you still have them, the potential to preserve them. And so this idea of nature-based infrastructure, understanding how nature works and trying to design remedial approaches that use those natural structures, is one that's growing in popularity and also in effectiveness. The site where we are today is an example of a shoreline that used to not have oyster reefs, and in this project we restored this reef and have since been using it as an experimental site. And so we measure how this reef functions and how it compares to natural systems, and then that can give you an expectation as you either restore or preserve sites in other settings as to what return you're going to get in terms of function and in terms of ecosystem services. So in doing this, we got a large amount of oyster shell and also a bunch of salt marsh plants, Spartina alterniflora, and several summers ago planted it and placed it here on the water side of the Institute of Marine Sciences. And because we are scientists, we of course had to follow its progression, and we've been able to see how it's changed in terms of its morphology and also how its function has changed. Our research in oyster reefs has shown that they are important sites for nitrogen removal, and that this nitrogen removal property is also present when they are restored systems. Nitrogen is very important in coastal areas because it limits primary production. So when there's too much nitrogen, you can end up with too much algae in the water, and that's a problem called eutrophication. And so eutrophication is conventionally combated using things like wastewater treatment plants and stormwater management to limit the amounts of nitrogen introduced into the environment. Nature-based infrastructure is great because you can use these natural systems to promote conditions that remove nitrogen. The idea of nature-based infrastructure is very important as you consider your overall plan as a coastal community. It's important because you need to value natural systems that you already have in place, and remember that whether or not you're actually realizing those dollars, they are providing you value. So an example of a park that has a marsh adjacent to it or an oyster reef adjacent to it, that park by some people might be seen as not providing any value beyond the recreation, but in fact it does. The other thing that can be considered is that many of these nature-based approaches are cost-effective. So if you restore an oyster reef or create a salt marsh, you may be providing services at a cost that would be very favorable compared to something like a wastewater treatment plant or stormwater treatment. So it can provide alternatives for gray infrastructure, for conventional engineering solutions. And the more we understand about natural systems, the better we can plan to use these nature-based solutions in an effective way.